normal standing. So from normal standing, we would take a step forward, which might be a natural step that you might take walking down the street when you're feeling slightly confident. So not a little tiny shuffly one, but just a natural step forward. Both feet sink down and onto the ground, hands rest onto the back of the body, and then shoulders lift up and forwards. So we get a feeling of lengthening up through the front leg into the front hip, and that draws the hip up and round so that the back of the pelvis stays nice and even. And then we're going to press down through your feet to bring yourself back up to standing. So we're going to now start to look at some variations. One of the things that you might want to consider is when we come forwards, so from a step forward, sometimes this happens. So we think we've come over evenly, but you can see from my pelvis that it's very uneven. So often that's why we have to lengthen into the front leg to bring the back of the pelvis to nice and even. And really helpful if you have a little look in the mirror to just see that for yourself, because sometimes it's hard to tell when we're living in our body and our habits. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take just a little tiny step forwards and do the same thing. So just take yourself a wee small step. You can be watching this or you can be doing it with me. Again, hands rest onto the back of your body. Lean yourself up and forwards. So there's much less work going on through the legs. The pelvis is much easier to remain stable or to remain horizontal or even. But the kind of benefits, some of the benefits are in taking that longer step. So press down through your feet, bring yourself up. So it might be that if your pelvis is unstable or if it just feels too much through the legs, that the shorter step is better. Another option is to take a much deeper step, so a much longer step, so much wider than you would take walking down the street. Shoulders relax down and away, and again bring yourself up and forwards. Really work by lifting up and through the front leg, up and into the hip, whilst we stay down through that front foot. So you'll notice far more feelings of aliveness in your legs. There's more going on through the back of the pelvis and the legs. And almost in some ways, it can become easier because we're doing less leaning forwards with the chest and the upper body compared to what's going on with the legs. So it's all a little bit of a balance here. So from here, press down through your feet, lift yourself back up. Another option that works for some people is we're working with fairly straight legs. You can have your legs just a tiny touch soft so that you're aware of that little bit of movement through the legs as you come forward, so that you become more aware of that kind of fluid connection through the legs and into the hips. So that's another option. And the other option is to really bend the knees. And this can be helpful if there's lower back issues or if it just feels better for you for whatever reason. So from just a natural step, that you can really, really bend the knees and slide your weight forwards. So we get a feeling of extending back through the tailbone, and then there's almost a lifting up and through the tummy. So we've got a kind of two-way movement through the body. The legs can remain very active. But for some people, this is going to be working better than the straighter leg versions. Down through the feet, you're going to bring yourself back up. Another nice option is to have your step forward and then to lift through your toes. So sometimes it depends on the body and the stories in your body, but sometimes we're lifting the toes, we get more feeling of aliveness through the legs, more support through the legs as we come forwards, so that it can bring a feeling of more almost support from within the body. So you can just let yourself come forwards this way. Another option is to keep your shoulders high. So keep high so that we keep the shoulders extending down, and we're just working with the starting movement of up and through the legs and into the pelvis. So these modifications are all about just working out, okay, how does it feel for me? And you might find, oh right, gosh, when I come onto this side, it's different. And if it's different, okay, how does this side want to move? Does it want the knee a little bit more bent? Does it want to need even more lengthening up through the hip to find that evenness? So it's really important we're working with all the different variations within our body and working towards that kind of unification of the two sides, the left and the right. But that we're working in a way where we are kind to ourselves. Settle yourself into your practice. Choose whether you're going to come into all fours like last week to start with. Maybe you'll come and try a variety of different things with Parsvottanasana. See if you can find a feeling of life in your spine. The ability to sink down and into the hips, and then to open and widen across the shoulders. Coming back to your breath, so that your breath sinks down and the movement of the body becomes more fluid as we breathe. Seeing if you can allow the body to breathe evenly and easily, naturally. Thinking of a feeling of length in the spine and an ability to release the shoulders. So even when the shoulders are moving in different ways, that we can find a sense of freedom within the shoulder joint. That we can find a way to allow the body to move freely. It might be that you're sitting with legs wide and taking the arms out and over to one side. It might be that you've decided just to sit quietly. It might be that you're lying on your back. Whatever you're doing, look for that feeling of aliveness through the body. So a feeling of aliveness in the legs, in the feet, in the torso, in the arms, in the hands. Look for that sense of gentle alertness throughout the body. So the body becomes more alive. You can also think of it that as the body becomes more alive, that the mind becomes quieter. So the mind remains active, it remains alert, it remains interested and curious. But the everyday thoughts start to still a little bit. Noticing the sides of your waist. Notice the sensations in the sides of the waist, and if there's any way for you to get a feeling of more movement, more openness. Think about the feet, the aliveness in the feet. So many little bones and joints within the feet. So many refined ways to move within the feet. Thinking about that gentle lift into the arches of the feet, the spreading and widening across the balls of the feet. Then like that spine that comes down through the outsides of the feet. And really notice what part of your feet are touching the floor right now. What part of your feet are touching the floor, and what's the contact like between your feet and the floor? If you take your hands onto the floor, then think of the same thing for your hands. How do they meet the floor? Can there be a steadiness? Can there be a gentleness at the same time? Our concept for this week is the concept of ahimsa. Ahimsa is a Sanskrit, and it's one of the yogic philosophies or main philosophies, the limbs of yoga that are like the kind of yoga rules of living. And ahimsa means non-violence. Non-violence or non-harming. So that is not doing things that do harm. Whether that's not doing things that harm other people, other lives or life forces. But it also in yoga very much applies to ourselves. How can we practice non-violence to ourselves? How can we not harm ourselves? It's so important because when we're doing yoga, often we'll be looking at finding edges, finding boundaries, finding aliveness. And obviously sometimes that finding aliveness is going to take us into a space where we become more open and we might go beyond our natural limits because that's the way that we grow. And yet at the same time we have to come back to that feeling of real kindness. So if you do Parsvottanasana, our pose of the week, and you come into it too hard, too fast, like any other pose, but you come into it with not enough awareness of your whole body, you might be thinking, oh, this is great, I can stretch my leg more here. But in the process of stretching your leg, later on you have a grumble in the back of your pelvis, or by practicing too hard at something or with too much focus, the mind becomes sharp and angular and unable to move freely and almost with a sense of looseness to it. I hope you've enjoyed your yoga practice today. I hope that you found something all by yourself for yourself. And my quote for you is from the Dalai Lama. Choose to be optimistic. It feels better. Choose to be optimistic. It feels better. I wish you sun in your heart and in your